Hello and welcome to another edition of Politics Today. Because of COVID-19 and the lockdown, I'm having to produce this programme from home, and so are my guests. They are Robin Benson, who's a Christian political commentator, and Regan King, who is a pastor and an author. So gentlemen, warm welcome to Politics Today, Home Edition.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Simon.
Well, for our viewers as well, we're actually going to be discussing Brexit today because the high-level Brexit negotiations are starting this week in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, as we all see that the restrictions that have been placed over the last few months are being eased, and now we're resembling a little bit like life as normal in comparison to what it was in March, certainly. So, Regan, can you give us an update really on your situation regarding your church in Islington up in North London?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Simon. It's good to be here. It's a unique time, unique situation. We as a church have continued to find opportunities to serve one another and serve the needy in our local area. Today, there's another 150 meals that are being prepared to get out to local elderly, vulnerable, and sheltering individuals. In this time, since lockdown, we've gone, I think, about 6,000 plus meals that have been prepared and distributed either out of here or in association with local suppliers. And that's been a real privilege and has produced a lot of gospel encouragement and contact.
Fantastic. And Robin, what's it like for you on the South Coast in your lovely home looking out onto the English Channel?
Oh, it's wonderful, gorgeous, glorious. You know, after February, March with all the rain and the wind and the caravan juddering every time there was a strong gust. It's such a contrast. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, couldn't be in a better place.
I'll start off with you, Regan, because this week's the government's key negotiations start with Brussels to come up with an agreement as we're in a transition period now. What would you make of the current negotiations in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, obviously, each individual government has its own stresses and burdens that it's attempting to deal with in relation to COVID-19. And yet the world doesn't stop, needs to stop, and trade negotiations related to Brexit don't stop. If we look at some of the big areas of discussion, we're going to continue to come across fishing and discussion regarding level playing fields. At the same time, if we consider the discussions where they're up to at the moment, we only have till 1st of July to pursue an extension to the agreement to have everything wrapped up essentially by year end. Boris Johnson is saying there's no possible way we're going to be pursuing such an extension. Indeed, that would go against the general agreement from the beginning of this, that we're going to meet the deadlines, we're going to continue and press on regardless. We could very well be heading to a no-deal situation after all.
And Robin, what are your thoughts on the Brexit negotiations? They've now become news headlines, certainly yesterday, as the Sunday papers picked up the interview with Michael Barnier, who is the EU's chief negotiator with Britain in Britain seeking an agreement with the European Union after Brexit. And he's actually threatening that if the government does not comply with the, I think it's called the Brexit interim agreement that Boris signed up to last autumn, then it looks like a no deal is on the table and the EU will walk away. And he's saying that really that Britain is not acting in good faith with that understanding that was reached in the autumn. What are your thoughts?
Well, as one of the documents that you forwarded to both of us, in preparation for this recording, points out that way back in 2017, Michel Barnier, stated publicly within the context of some sort of European leaders meeting that it was certainly his intention, and if he's speaking then for the Commission and the Parliament, it's the EU's intention to teach the UK a lesson and to make it hard for us to leave, as probably a warning to the other EU states. This is how we treated the UK. You'll get exactly the same treatment if you go down the same routes. So this seems to be now bearing some sort of fruit in the stance that this guy is taking. But, we're in, as Regan has pointed out, we're in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, as is the rest of Europe, right across, up and down, east-west. And there was bound to be then a clash of interests and a clash of politics and diplomacy as governments within the EU are trying to sort out, how they're coping with this, as is the UK, supposedly outside of it to some degree. And we're now faced with a situation that important negotiations are kicking off this week, but actually no one has really any idea where they're going to go, because everybody's distracted apart from those who want to pursue the negotiations. And
Regan King, the Sunday Times this week has particularly revealed the British position, which is that they are seeking, or they're wanting to seek, a deal with the EU, but what they want is that they don't want to be tied into the European single market and the customs union. And this is something that Michel Barnier and the EU want, because also wants foreign fishing vessels to be able to fish in our sea seems to be another major issue, as well as the Court of Human Rights. And so sources close to Michel Barnier have actually suggested that he could be open to a 2-year delay on the Brexit negotiations. And sources in the British government indicate that January the 31st is the deadline in which they want an agreement done. What is the likelihood that we're going to see a standoff between Britain and the EU as the months draw closer to January of this year?
Well, this is a concern that we could reach a bit of a stalemate. And if we consider there was just in the past couple of days a statement made by the Lords in which it was highlighted that Northern Ireland could particularly lose out in this if we come to such a situation. Basically, businesses based in Great Britain said could conclude it's economically unviable to continue to operate in Northern Ireland, which will be operating alongside the EU trade laws. So when it comes to how everything is going to pan out, we do need to bear in mind that it's not only ourselves here in Great Britain, we also need to remember we are United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and try to come to a solution that is also considerate of their needs and the ongoing stability of Northern Ireland. The EU definitely is open to, and it's in their best interest to have potentially yet another delay to this. But I think, as we've seen even in last year, there's no appetite to continue these talks in the UK. There's no desire to prolong our full departure. And so unless we see any extension applied for by 1st of July, I don't think it's going to happen.
Can I just come in? So, Regan, is our reading of it correct, that really the end of June is a crunch turning point?
Absolutely.
Even though the 31st of December is the sort of international legal aspect of it, but the end of this month is the crunch as far as a potential extension is concerned.
That's right. The transition deadline is in December. Yeah. My understanding is that the ability to apply for an extension is the end of June, 1st of July. And so that means that we are really approaching a critical moment in regard to trade negotiations. At the moment, things have appeared to descend into playground politics. You have someone that's essentially saying, we want to teach the UK a lesson it won't forget, and trying to hold things over without actually trying to actually reach a unified agreement that works for everyone.
Yeah. Robin, according to my notes here, which I've taken from the Sunday Times this week, that high-level, high-stake negotiations are due to take place in mid-June, and it's expected they will take place between the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the EU Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen, whatever her name is.
Von der Leyen.
Von der Leyen. There you go. You always struggle with foreign names, even on the European report. So it would seem that would then up the ante in terms of negotiations between Britain and the European Union. And do you think maybe with those two figures having high-level discussions between them, that we might actually get to some sort of agreement or be on track for the December the 31st deadline?
I can't, I mean, I'm not a politician and I'm not privy to, these discussions, but on a practical level, taking into account what Regan has already said, in the last few minutes, I think it's very unlikely that a December 31st agreement could be reached. Boris Johnson and all of his cabinet have had to concentrate on COVID-19 and all the repercussions, the health, the economics, the social, the mental, everything over the last 5-6 months. That has been the focus of their attention when they actually should have been negotiating with the European Union on this agreement. So all of a sudden to think that in the space of the next 2 weeks, a 5 to 6 month time deficit can be overcome when Boris himself, as we know, is still recovering from his own health issues with COVID-19. And the whole thing is just in disarray. I mean, if he does not produce the goods by December the 19th, he's in even deeper trouble than he is now. The country's already champing at the bit to throw off the lockdown and all the restrictions. People who voted for him in the last general election on the basis that he was going to get us out of the European Union, lock, stock and barrel, by the 31st of December this year, are going to be up in arms if come the end of this month, if there's an indication that that whole process is going to be extended for another 2 years. People will not wear it.
Absolutely. Regan, I'll bring you on to board this one. When you actually see and read the article, the interview that the Sunday Times did with Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, he gives the impression that the EU is super strong, and yet what's happened with the COVID-19 crisis has really exposed the EU's weaknesses, particularly in Italy, who felt that they've been abandoned by the EU, as well as Spain. We've seen that nations have gone back to their original national borders, as they've shown that the Schengen Agreement hasn't worked. That free movement of people and goods throughout Europe has actually fueled the pandemic rather than actually solved it. So really, shouldn't we be turning the tables now and putting our attention on the European Union, saying surely out of this crisis the EU faces an existential threat?
Well, I think this has been brewing for some time. In talking with various people across the continent on various trips I've made, the impression from the people on the ground that there still is that sense of independence, and yet the EU has, to some extent, caused the political landscape to be very codependent. That's never healthy. Codependent relationships are never healthy. And that's essentially what the EU has created. If you look even at some of the poorer and newer member states of the EU, Germany has been in control in large amount. Consider Albania, which I don't believe they've formally been processed yet, but the investment in Albania regarding roads and its infrastructure is primarily German. And so it's less than confidence inspiring when we hear that even in Germany, there are rumblings against the EU. We have had a court this past week that has basically enacted something, and perhaps you can talk more to that, Simon or Robin, but their constitutional court issued an unprecedented ruling challenging the authority of the European Court, the European Central Bank, and the Court of Justice. And that just really, something doesn't seem right if you have your most powerful member state turning against you like that. Additionally, talking with various Christians I know in Germany and Austria over the years, I've had this distinct impression that they were thrilled with Brexit. They were thrilled that we had the opportunity to leave. And one friend of mine who's pastoring a church in Frankfurt, he said really he hoped and prayed that Germany at some point would find it in itself to have the same independence. So I do believe that the main people across the field see this is something that's been superimposed on the common populace in a way that is against their wishes, but it's something they kind of have to go along with.
Yeah, that's my sense from the article that I read that article when it came out, about the German court's ruling a couple of weeks ago, and it is just mind-boggling that the High Court in Germany has issued a ruling that countermands both the European Court of Justice and the quantitative easing of the European Central Bank. It's saying you can't do this. You can't do it to Germany. Well, if you can't do it to Germany, you can't do it to any other nation. And it just shows how beneath the surface, this facade of unity, there are these, as Regan has pointed out, these rumblings of people dissatisfied with what goes on in the bubble in Brussels, and a bit like the Westminster bubble, only exponentially bigger. That is just totally cut off from the reality of everyday people and how they have to work through these crises in the individual nations that make up the EU.
But surely this comes down to a question is that the European Union and the whole continent of Europe is not going to be the same after this crisis. When this crisis finally goes away and we have some resemblance of normality back in our lives, but not also looking at the deep economic impacts that COVID-19 is going to have on Europe, and what type of economy the Europeans are going to have, and what type of nations are going to emerge, that it's going to be a very, very different EU, and it's going to be a very, very different Europe. Do you think that people will now, after this crisis, start demanding more freedom, or do you think the EU will go in an opposite direction and start to move closer and closer to the United States of Europe to achieve their ultimate goal, which is a federal Europe?
I think what Brussels may go down the route that you just described, but I think at the other end of the system, individual nation states, and particularly the people in the individual nation states, may not be willing to wear it. As you pointed out, or as Regan pointed out, you've got Italy and Spain and Greece in Southern Europe who are on the verge of economic collapse. They are totally dependent upon money that is being plowed into the European Union, particularly by Germany, but also by France. And then you've got several other Northern European nations who, again, within the context of that article, who are very tight with their money, and they don't want to see it, in their view, frittered away in economies that are just a mess. So you have almost a north-south divide in the European Union already, never mind nation states pulling away in all sorts of different directions.
And Regan, I have to bring in the Prime Minister's health. To think where we are June 2020 compared to where we were in November, December 2019. Back in December, Boris Johnson won an historic election in which he won a huge majority, and then passed the Brexit agreement legislation, so we could actually be in this transition phase for a year until the government can actually negotiate an agreement with the EU. Now, there are reports that his health is not great at the moment, that he hasn't recovered well from COVID-19. We also see his weaknesses being exposed by the Dominic Cummings scandal that has rocked this government, and combined with the fact that inside sources says that he's not really enjoying the job right now. So what would it take, you think, to for Boris to get his bounce back and start leading as he did prior to the COVID-19 crisis?
It's a very difficult situation he's in, not one that anyone envisioned, much less himself, I'm sure. I think Boris, at the time of his election, came in thinking, I'm going to fulfill the mandate of the people. I'm going to be a second Churchill for them. I'm going to accomplish my lifelong dream, and I'm going to give the people what they want in some degree. And, you know, everything happened at the end of January with Brexit and everything well and truly being kicked off in regards to negotiations. But from December, I know it was early January, I believe, I first came across this mysterious pneumonia-like illness that had suddenly begun to cause severe complications in people in China. And as that story developed, just to see the response and how it's changed, it did not do much to inspire confidence in the government's ability to handle a massive public health crisis. Now, honestly, I don't know that any government would have acted in such a way to instill confidence in ability such a mysterious public health crisis. I do feel that the actions of other countries, particularly the actions taken in Wuhan to lock things down, in some way pressured other nations to follow suit, so that it became a must across the board. If you didn't lock down, if you didn't do this, then you weren't even as good a government as China. And so that kind of set a bar, a standard that nations had to follow regardless of their situation, regardless of the impact the virus was having locally. Boris has said repeatedly, others have indicated as well, when he contracted COVID-19, that it was touch and go for a while. Now, we do know that we're at some point or another prone to overstatement, but we should probably take him at his word and trust the man was in ICU, and it probably wasn't just because he was the prime minister. And so the recovery is going to take a while. To jump right into a high-stress job, as this is, dealing not only with COVID-19, but international relationships, the least of which is not Brexit. I mean, we have such a big thing already on the table. To have COVID-19 thrown into it makes it a very thankless task, to have the potential, I believe, for race riots even to come here. When we had marches in London disregarding all of the COVID-19 guidelines, where thousands of protesters were marching. I remember 2011, hot summer, discontent people, opportunity came. There were riots in London and in various other cities. I don't think we should rule that out here. If Boris cannot in some way inspire some confidence, the coming situation, further hypocrisy being revealed in other sectors of the government. It's not just a Tory thing. We've seen one of the front benchers and Labour has had to leave. Who can forget the advisor, the medical advisor about a month ago, who was discovered after saying we have to have lockdown. He's breaking lockdown to have his adulterous affair, and all of that causes people to be upset and on edge. And so we need to seriously be taking the words of Scripture seriously, and be praying for our leaders, for those in authority. We need to ask the question of Psalm 2, why is it that the nations rage? And to understand that everything going on around us is part of a bigger plan and a bigger picture that God is working out. We must be faithful in who we are as followers of Jesus Christ, to continue to shine the light and love of Christ.
Absolutely. Well, so we're down to a minute 30 left in the program. So Robin, this just really shows us what spiritual mess our nation is in, and how much we need the Lord, and how much as Christians we need to be praying and interceding. We thought we had Brexit delivered, and then COVID-19 came, which is probably going to shatter our entire economy, and also make governance absolutely near impossible in our nation. And we need that peace that passes all understanding, don't we, to come back to these lands and the shores. But it's going to take something spiritual and something incredible, special deliverance from the Lord to do that on a Dunkirk scale, I believe.
Well, I think you're right, Simon, but I think there needs to be some recognitions here. I mean, Reagan has painted a pretty accurate picture of where things are at. But I think I would add into that we're in danger of becoming an idolatrous nation, in the sense that we've made Brexit an idol. We've made the fear of COVID an idol to some degree. Science, they're always quoting the science says this. Science has become an idol to those who are in governmental, authority. So God is not in the picture. I was reading the first chapter of Proverbs this morning, and the Lord says, if you ignore me, I'm going to ignore you. And as a nation, we have ignored God, and we're beginning to pay the consequences of it. And we need to turn back to the Lord.
Amen. And that's a good note to end the program on. So thank you so much, Reagan, and thank you so much, Robin, for joining me on this home edition of Politics Today. And I want to thank you for watching this program. It's important that as Christians that we pray for our government, we intercede for our government and our nation. And the situation may look dire, but when we have God on our side, we have hope. And so this is why we need to look up, because our redemption draws near. So thank you for watching this home edition of Politics Today.